"You're nothing," Terrence whispered to his wife at the company anniversary gala, his mistress on his arm, his family laughing behind him. She didn't respond. Then the lights dimmed. Her face appeared on the screen. Founder and CEO, his world shattered in one slide. Everything belonged to her. Sometimes the people closest to us never see who we really are. They see what they want to see. And when the truth finally comes to light, it's already too late. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel was drowning in gold light and champagne glasses that night. Sterling Global Innovations was celebrating 15 years of dominance in the tech industry, and everybody who was anybody had shown up. Executives in custom suits, investors with their perfectly practiced smiles, employees trying to look comfortable in clothes they'd bought just for tonight. The company had gone from a dream to a $65 billion empire, and tonight was about showing the world just how far they'd come. But in the corner of that glittering room, at a small table near the kitchen doors, sat a woman nobody was looking at. Her name was Imani, and she wore a simple black dress that probably cost $100 while everyone else was draped in thousands. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, no jewelry except a thin gold wedding band that looked like it had seen better days. She sat alone, hands folded in her lap, holding a worn leather journal like it was the only friend she had left. Across the room, the energy was different. Terrence Sterling walked in like he owned the place, because in his mind, he did. Tall, confident, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's rent. His arm was wrapped around Bianca Hayes, the woman he'd just promoted to vice president of operations. She was everything he wanted the world to see. Bold, loud, wearing a red dress that demanded attention and heels that clicked like gunshots on the marble floor. Her laugh carried across the room, sharp and performative, and Terrence ate it up like it was oxygen. His mother Lorraine and his sister Shanice weren't far behind. Lorraine moved through the crowd like royalty, stopping to air-kiss people she barely knew, making sure everyone saw her designer handbag and the diamonds at her throat. Shanice walked beside her, younger but just as poisonous, scrolling through her phone and whispering commentary about everyone's outfits. They spotted Imani sitting alone and exchanged a look, the kind of look that said everything without words. Lorraine made her way over to Imani's table, Shanice trailing behind with a smirk already forming on her lips. Lorraine's voice was loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Still here? Thought you'd have the dignity to stay home." Shanice laughed, not even trying to hide it. "Right, I mean, everyone knows what's happening. Why embarrass yourself?" Imani didn't look up. She just traced her finger along the edge of her journal, her face unreadable. The women at the next table pretended not to listen, but their eyes said they heard everything. One of them whispered something to her friend, and they both looked at Imani with a mixture of pity and secondhand shame. Lorraine leaned in closer, her perfume overwhelming. "My son built an empire, and you're just, what, furniture at this point? Decoration that doesn't even look good anymore." Shanice cackled. "Mom, stop, you're gonna make her cry again." But Imani didn't cry. She just sat there, silent, her fingers still on that journal. Lorraine straightened up, satisfied with her cruelty, and walked away. Shanice followed, throwing one last look over her shoulder. "Pathetic," she muttered, just loud enough for Imani to hear. Orchestrated narrative pacing and scene progression for cinematic script. Good start. I'm establishing the humiliation scene, showing the triple betrayal, husband plus mistress, his mother and sister, the public nature. Now I need to continue with Terrence's direct insult, then move into the reveal. I'm at about 650 words. Need to pace this to reach 6,800 to 7,000 total. Let me continue building the scene, then move into the flashback section. Terrence walked past Imani's table without so much as a glance. But as he passed, he leaned down just slightly, his lips near her ear, and whispered words that cut deeper than any knife. "You're nothing." That's all he said. 3 words. But they carried 10 years of disrespect, 10 years of taking her for granted, 10 years of believing his own lies. Bianca saw the interaction and smiled, her hand tightening on Terrence's arm like she'd won some kind of prize. They kept walking, headed toward the stage where Terrence was scheduled to give a speech. Imani stayed seated. Tears rolled down her cheeks slowly, silently, but something else was happening in her eyes. Something that nobody in that room would recognize because they'd never bothered to really look at her. It wasn't pain, it was patience. The kind of patience that comes from knowing something nobody else knows. The kind of patience that waits for the perfect moment. A man in a gray suit approached her table. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen a lot of boardrooms. He bent down slightly and spoke in a low voice. "Ma'am, whenever you're ready." Imani nodded once, barely a movement, and the man straightened up and walked away. Nobody noticed the exchange. They were all watching Terrence take the stage. The lights focused on him as he grabbed the microphone with the confidence of a man who believed his own mythology. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here to celebrate this incredible milestone. 15 years ago, I had a vision." He paused for effect, letting the room absorb his presence. A vision of what technology could become, of what innovation could achieve. And tonight, standing here with all of you, I'm proud to say we did it. We built something extraordinary. The room applauded. Bianca stood near the stage, beaming up at him like he was delivering the Sermon on the Mount. Terrence continued. And part of building something extraordinary means recognizing talent, means elevating people who share your vision and your drive. Tonight, I want to officially announce the promotion of Bianca Hayes to Vice President of Operations. More applause. Bianca walked up onto the stage, and Terrence handed her a glass of champagne. They toasted, their glasses clinking in a sound that felt like nails on a chalkboard to anyone who knew the truth. "Bianca represents the future of this company," Terrence said, looking at her with something that definitely wasn't professional admiration. "She's brilliant, fearless, and exactly what we need to take Sterling Global to the next level." Imani watched from her corner. She didn't clap. She didn't move. She just watched, her hands still on that leather journal, as her husband praised his mistress on a stage in a company that didn't belong to him. An employee at a nearby table leaned over to his colleague. "Man, that's cold. His wife is right there." The colleague shrugged. "I heard she's just, like, I don't know, there. Doesn't do anything. He built all this himself." The first employee looked uncomfortable. Still cold, though. But Imani wasn't thinking about what people whispered. She was thinking about a different time, a different version of herself. A version these people had never met and would never understand. Her mind drifted back, pulled by memories that felt both distant and immediate, back to where it all began, back to when she was just a girl with a dream and a mother who believed in quiet strength. She grew up in a small town in North Carolina where everybody knew everybody and secrets were currency. Her mother was a school teacher, the kind of woman who wore cardigans and carried canvas bags full of books and believed education was the only real way out. Imani was her only child, and from the time Imani could remember, her mother had told her the same thing over and over. Quiet strength moves mountains, baby. You don't have to be the loudest in the room to be the most powerful. Imani believed it because her mother lived it. She watched her mother handle difficult parents with grace, watched her stand up to a principal who wanted to cut funding for after-school programs, watched her do it all without raising her voice or making a scene. She just moved, steady and sure, and somehow things changed around her. Imani wanted to be like that, wanted to carry that same quiet certainty into whatever life had planned for her. She was brilliant with numbers, could see patterns where other people saw chaos, could build systems in her mind before she ever touched a computer. By high school, she was winning math competitions and coding challenges like they were nothing. Her guidance counselor told her she could go anywhere. MIT, Stanford, Caltech, name it. Imani chose MIT because it was far enough away to feel like freedom, but close enough that she could still visit her mother on holidays. The night before she left for college, her mother gave her a gift. It was a leather journal, simple and brown, with her initials pressed into the bottom corner. "Write your dreams here," her mother said, holding Imani's hands in hers, all of them, every single one. "And one day, baby, you're gonna build them all. I know you will." Imani hugged her mother and promised she'd make her proud. She didn't know then that it would be one of the last real conversations they'd have before everything changed. MIT was everything and nothing like she expected. The work was hard, but she loved it. The competition was fierce, but she thrived in it. By her second year, she was already developing an algorithm that would change everything. It was a supply chain optimization system, something that could predict disruptions and reroute resources in real time. Professors told her it was revolutionary. Investors started sniffing around before she even graduated. By the time she was 22, she'd filed the patents, incorporated a company, and named it Sterling Global Innovations. Sterling, not after some future husband, after the silver bracelet her mother wore every single day, thin and unbreakable, just like the strength she'd taught Imani to carry. She built that company out of her dorm room first, then a tiny office she could barely afford, then a real space with real employees. It grew fast, faster than she'd imagined. By the time she was 25, Sterling Global was worth $2 million and climbing. That's when she met Terrence. It was at a networking event in Boston. One of those mixers where everyone's pretending to be more important than they are, and the wine is cheap, but people drink it anyway. Terrence was working in middle management at some logistics firm, talking loud about his goals and his vision, and how he was going to run his own company one day. Imani was standing near the back, listening more than talking, when he noticed her. He walked over with that confident smile, introduced himself, and somehow made her feel like she was the only person in the room. He was charming, ambitious. He asked her about her work and actually seemed to listen. He didn't talk over her or try to one-up her stories. He laughed at her jokes, remembered small details from their conversations, texted her the next day to ask how a meeting went. For someone who'd spent most of her life being quiet and invisible, his attention felt like sunlight. They started dating within a month. He moved into her apartment within 6. They were married within a year. Looking back, Imani could see the signs, could see the moments where she should have questioned things. But love makes you stupid sometimes, makes you ignore the voice in the back of your head that says something isn't right. Terrence loved the idea of her success, but only when it made him look good. He loved telling people his girlfriend was a CEO, loved the status it gave him at his boring middle management job. When they got married, he started calling Sterling Global our company, even though he'd had nothing to do with building it. Imani made him CFO 6 months into their marriage. She told herself it was because she trusted him, because she wanted to share her success with the man she loved. But really, it was because he'd started making comments, little digs about how she never included him in decisions, how he felt like an outsider in her life, how marriage was supposed to be a partnership. So she gave him a title, gave him a salary that would have made his old colleagues weep with envy, and put the company into a trust structure under a holding corporation to protect it legally. Terrence signed the papers without reading them, never asked questions about ownership or structure, just assumed that because he was CFO, because his name was Sterling now too, that the company was his. And for a while, things were good. Or good enough. The company kept growing. 5 million, 10 million, 50 million. They bought a house in a neighborhood where everyone had houses that looked the same and smiles that looked fake. Terrence's mother, Lorraine, moved in after his father died, and that's when things started to shift. Lorraine had opinions about everything, about how Imani dressed, how she wore her hair, how she talked to Terrence, how she didn't understand what it meant to be married to a man building an empire. "My son is going to be one of the most powerful men in this industry," Lorraine said one Sunday over dinner. "He needs a wife who can match that energy, someone who knows how to work a room, how to network, how to be seen." She looked at Imani when she said it, her meaning crystal clear. Imani just nodded and kept eating. Terrence said nothing, didn't defend her, didn't tell his mother to back off, just cut his steak and changed the subject. As Sterling Global grew into a billion-dollar company, then 5 billion, then more, Terrence changed too, started taking credit for strategies Imani had developed, started telling investors that he'd been the visionary behind their biggest innovations, started bringing Imani to events but introducing her as my wife instead of the founder. And Imani let it happen. Let him rewrite history in real time because some part of her still believed in the man she'd married, still believed he'd remember who'd given him everything. That's when Bianca entered the picture. Terrence met her at a tech conference in San Francisco. She was working for a competitor, sharp and aggressive, and everything Terrence seemed to think Imani wasn't. He came home talking about her like she was some kind of prodigy. "She gets it," he said, pacing their bedroom while Imani sat on the bed. "She understands what it takes to win in this industry, that killer instinct." Imani asked if he was thinking of hiring her. Terrence smiled. "Already did. She starts next month." Bianca came into Sterling Global like a hurricane. Loud opinions in every meeting, always staying late, always making sure Terrence saw her dedication. Imani watched it unfold from her quiet corner of the office. She still came in every day, still sat in on board meetings as administrative support because it kept her invisible and let her see everything. She watched Terrence and Bianca's late nights turn into business trips, watched the way they looked at each other in the elevator, watched Bianca touch his arm just a little too long when they talked. Lorraine loved Bianca, loved her energy, her confidence, the way she laughed at all of Terrence's jokes and acted like he was the smartest man alive. "Now that's the kind of woman who belongs next to success," Lorraine said one evening when Bianca came over for dinner. She looked right at Imani when she said it. Shanice, Terrence's sister, chimed in. "Right? Like finally someone who gets it." Imani set the table and said nothing. Terrence smiled at Bianca across the table like Imani wasn't even there. The affair was obvious to everyone except apparently to Imani, or at least that's what they thought. Employees whispered about it. The executive assistant saw them leaving hotels. The night security guard watched them kiss in the parking garage. But nobody said anything to Imani because they assumed she was too weak, too passive, too nothing to do anything about it anyway. They were wrong. Imani knew everything, knew about the hotels, knew about the trips, knew about the apartment Terrence was renting downtown for their meetings. She knew because she'd hired someone to document it all. Every date, every location, every receipt. She kept it all in a folder in her safe at home, right next to the original incorporation papers for Sterling Global Innovations. Papers that had her name and only her name on them. Papers that proved what everyone had forgotten or never known. This company was hers. Every brick, every dollar, every success story that Terrence told at cocktail parties, all of it was hers. But Imani waited. She waited because she wanted to be sure, wanted to see exactly how far Terrence would go, how much he was willing to destroy for a woman who was only interested in his borrowed power. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday night, 3 weeks before the anniversary gala. Imani had stayed late at the office, working in a small room most people didn't even know existed. She heard voices coming from Terrence's office down the hall, heard his laugh, heard Bianca's voice, sultry and confident. She walked quietly toward the sound, stood just outside the door where she could hear, but not be seen. "When are you leaving her?" Bianca asked. The words hung in the air like smoke. Terrence sighed, and Imani could picture him leaning back in his chair, hands behind his head, that smug expression he wore when he thought he had everything figured out. "Soon," he said. "Once I secure my position, make sure everything's locked down. The board loves me. The investors trust me. This company is my legacy. I just need to time it right." "And her?" Bianca's voice had an edge now. "What about her?" Terrence laughed. Actually laughed. "She's just dead weight at this point. Has been for years. Honestly, I don't even know what she does all day. Shows up to events looking sad and invisible. It's embarrassing." Bianca made a sound of agreement. "I don't know how you've dealt with it this long." Terrence's voice got quieter, more serious. "Because I built something here, something real. And I'm not going to let anyone take that from me, not her, not anyone." Imani stood outside that door, listening to her husband erase her existence with every word. She didn't cry this time, didn't feel that sharp pain in her chest that usually came when he hurt her. She felt something else, something cold and clear and final. She walked back to her office, pulled out her leather journal, and wrote one line. "It's time." The next morning, Imani scheduled a meeting with the board chairman. She made one phone call to her lawyer, a woman she'd kept on retainer for years, who specialized in corporate law and knew exactly where all the bodies were buried. She booked an appointment with a stylist, someone who could make her look like the CEO she actually was, and she confirmed her attendance at the anniversary gala with a note to the event coordinator. She wanted a table, somewhere in the back, somewhere she could watch everything unfold. For the next 3 weeks, Imani moved like a ghost through her own life. She didn't confront Terrence, didn't argue with Lorraine, didn't react when Shanice made another snide comment over Sunday dinner. She just watched, planned, waited, and in that leather journal she wrote down every detail of what was about to happen. Her mother had told her to write her dreams. This wasn't exactly a dream, but it was something close. It was justice. The night of the gala arrived and everything came full circle. That's how Imani ended up in that corner, in that simple black dress, holding that journal while her husband paraded his mistress around like a trophy. That's how she ended up sitting silently while his family humiliated her in front of colleagues and strangers. That's how she ended up hearing those 3 words, "You're nothing." But Terence didn't know what was coming. None of them did. After his speech, after the applause died down, and Bianca took her place next to him on that stage, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. People assumed it was part of the program. Another video, another congratulatory montage. The screen behind Terence lit up with the Sterling Global Innovations logo, sleek and professional. Then text appeared. Sterling Global Innovations, founded 2010. Terence smiled, thinking this was his moment. But then the image changed. A photograph filled the screen. A young woman with bright eyes and determination in her face, sitting in a tiny dorm room surrounded by computer equipment and whiteboards covered in equations. The caption underneath read, "Founder and CEO, Imani Sterling." The room went silent. Not the polite silence of an attentive audience. The shocked silence of people realizing they'd gotten something very, very wrong. Terence's smile froze on his face. He turned to look at the screen, his brain trying to process what his eyes were seeing. Bianca took a step back, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion. The video montage began to play. Images of Imani at 22, coding in that dorm room, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop. Imani at 24, signing incorporation papers in a cramped office, her signature clear and bold at the bottom. Imani at 26, shaking hands with their first major investor, her smile genuine and hopeful. Imani at 28, standing in front of their first real office building, arms crossed, looking like she owned the world because she did. Every milestone, every major deal, every patent filing, her name, her face, her work, documents flashed across the screen. The original articles of incorporation with Imani's signature, the patent filings with her name as the sole inventor, the trust structure that put the company under a holding corporation she controlled. Every single legal document that proved one undeniable truth. Sterling Global Innovations belonged to Imani. It always had. Then her voice filled the ballroom, recorded and clear, speaking over the images. "I built this company alone. At 22 years old, in a dorm room at MIT, I created the algorithm that became our foundation. I filed the patents. I found the investors. I hired the first employees. I named it Sterling, not for him, for my mother, for the silver bracelet she wore every day, for the strength she taught me to carry. Sterling, unbreakable." The video ended. The lights stayed dim for one more moment, and in that moment, Imani stood up from her corner table. She'd transformed. Her hair was down now, styled in perfect waves. The simple dress was gone, replaced by a tailored gown in deep emerald that fit her like armor. She wore heels that made her taller, more commanding. Diamond earrings caught the light. But more than any of that, she carried herself differently. Shoulders back, head high, eyes focused. She looked like what she was, a CEO, a founder, a woman who'd built an empire while everyone in this room ignored her. She walked toward the stage slowly, deliberately, and every eye followed her. Employees who'd walked past her for years suddenly saw her for the first time. Investors who'd shaken Terence's hand and ignored Imani's realized their mistake. Board members who'd sat through meetings with her in the back row understood why she'd always been there. She wasn't support staff. She wasn't furniture. She was the person they all answered to. Terrence stood frozen on that stage, his face drained of all color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Bianca backed up another step, her red dress suddenly looking cheap and desperate under the lights. In the audience, Lorraine's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Shanice stared at her phone screen like it might offer her an escape route from reality. Imani climbed the stairs to the stage. Each step echoed in the silent ballroom. She reached Terrence and stopped, standing close enough that he could see the calm fury in her eyes. She took the microphone from his hand without asking, her movement smooth and practiced. He let it go like it burned him. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady, not loud, not emotional, just steady and clear and absolutely final. For 10 years, I stayed quiet. I let you take credit for my work. I let you tell investors that you built this company. I let you rewrite history in every interview and every speech. I let your family move into my house and treat me like I was the help. I watched you fall in love with someone else and promote her in my boardroom. I let you whisper in my ear tonight that I was nothing. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the crowd. I was never nothing, Terrence. I was everything. I was the foundation, the vision, the work, the sacrifice. I was the person who built this entire company from an idea into a $65 billion reality, and you were too busy believing your own lies to ever see it. Terrence tried to speak. Imani, But she held up one hand, and he stopped. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that he didn't even think to push back. She turned to Bianca, who looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. The vice president title you just accepted. The promotion you thought was going to launch your career. It requires board approval. I am the board. Every decision runs through me. Every promotion, every hire, every strategic move. And as of this moment, you're fired. Bianca's face went white. You can't. But Imani was already moving on. She turned back to Terrence. Your position as CFO revoked. Your company credit cards canceled. Your access to all accounts suspended. Security will escort you out tonight. You have until Monday to clear your personal items from the office. After that, anything left will be disposed of. She looked out into the audience, found Lorraine sitting at a premium table, her face a mask of shock and rage. And the house you've been living in for the past 8 years, the one you redecorated without asking me, the one where you held dinners and talked about me like I was nothing, that's my house. I bought it before I married your son. My name is the only one on the deed. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone started to clap. Slowly at first, then another person joined, then another. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. Employees who'd watched Imani be disrespected for years. Junior staff who'd always wondered why she was so quiet. Women who'd felt invisible in their own lives and saw themselves in her story. They clapped like their lives depended on it. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the stage. Imani nodded to them, and they moved forward. Terrence looked around desperately, searching for an ally, someone to tell him this was all a mistake. But every face he saw looked back with either shock or satisfaction. The board chairman, the man who'd spoken to Imani earlier, stood near the front. He gave Terrence a small, grim smile. Should have read the paperwork, son. The security guards escorted Terrence off the stage. He walked like a man in a dream, his legs moving but his mind somewhere else entirely. Bianca followed, trying to maintain some dignity but failing spectacularly. Her heels clicked frantically as she hurried toward the exit, her red dress like a beacon of her humiliation. People watched them go, whispered to each other, pulled out their phones to text people who weren't there. This would be the story of the year in their industry. The CEO who'd hidden in plain sight, the husband who'd taken credit for everything, the mistress who'd climbed the wrong ladder, the family who'd bet on the wrong horse. Imani stayed on that stage for another moment, microphone in hand, looking out at the crowd. I know a lot of you are wondering why I waited so long, why I let this happen, why I didn't speak up sooner. She paused. The truth is, I wanted to see it, wanted to see exactly how far people would go when they thought I was weak, when they thought I was nothing, and now I know. Now we all know. She set the microphone down on the podium and walked off the stage, her head high, her steps measured. The applause followed her all the way to the exit. The aftermath was brutal and swift. By the time Terrence made it home that night, his corporate credit cards had already been declined. The luxury sedan he'd been driving, leased under the company's name, was repossessed by morning. His phone started buzzing with messages from colleagues and contacts, but not the supportive kind. The kind that said they'd heard what happened and they needed to distance themselves. The kind that said they couldn't be associated with someone who'd been exposed as a fraud. His network, the thing he'd valued more than his marriage, dissolved in less than 48 hours. Bianca's downfall was equally spectacular. The story spread through the industry like wildfire. The woman who'd been sleeping with her boss and accepted a promotion in the CEO's face. The woman who'd been fired publicly at a gala in front of hundreds of witnesses. Her phone calls went unreturned. Her LinkedIn messages were left unread. Companies that had been courting her a week ago suddenly had no open positions. She tried to reach out to Terrence, thinking maybe they could salvage something together, but his number was blocked. He'd blamed her for everything, told himself that if she hadn't pushed him, if she hadn't been so ambitious, none of this would have happened. It was easier than admitting he'd destroyed his own life. Within a month, Bianca left the city, just packed up her apartment and disappeared to somewhere no one in their industry would know her name. The last anyone heard, she was working in some regional marketing firm in the Midwest, making a fraction of what she'd been pulling at Sterling Global. Her Instagram, once full of luxury brunches and designer bags, went dark. Lorraine and Shanice faced their own reckoning. The eviction notice came 10 days after the gala, 30 days to vacate, just like Imani had said. Lorraine tried everything, called lawyers who told her she had no legal standing, called Terrence, who wasn't answering her calls anymore, even tried to call Imani directly, but the number went straight to an assistant who politely informed her that all communication needed to go through legal counsel. Shanice posted bitter messages on social media about betrayal and family loyalty, but they rang hollow when people knew the real story. The women who'd sat at their social club, who'd attended their charity luncheons, who'd smiled and nodded when Lorraine talked about her successful son, they all knew now. Knew that Terrence had never built anything. Knew that the daughter-in-law they'd helped Lorraine mock was actually the source of everything they'd enjoyed. The invitations dried up. The calls stopped coming. Lorraine and Shanice moved into a modest apartment across town, the kind of place they'd looked down on just months before. 3 months after the gala, Terrence showed up at Sterling Global's headquarters. He looked different, thinner, tired. The confidence that had defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked like desperation. He tried to get past security in the lobby, claimed he just needed to talk to Imani for 5 minutes. The security guard, a young man who'd been working there for years and had watched Imani eat lunch alone in the cafeteria, more times than he could count, shook his head. "Sir, you're not on the access list. I can't let you up." Terence tried to argue, raised his voice, caused enough of a scene that other security personnel arrived. Through the glass walls of the lobby, he could see into the main atrium. There was a board meeting happening in the conference room on the second floor. He could see Imani through the glass, standing at the head of the table, gesturing as she spoke. Every person in that room focused on her like she was the sun. She looked powerful, at peace, like she'd finally stepped into the skin she was always meant to wear. Terence stood there watching her, really seeing her maybe for the first time in years, and something broke inside him. He realized what he'd lost. Not just the money or the status or the company, but her. The woman who'd loved him when he was nobody, who'd shared everything she built with him, who'd stood by him even when he didn't deserve it. He'd thrown it all away for a woman who ran at the first sign of trouble and an ego that couldn't handle not being the star of the story. Security escorted him out. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, just staring at nothing. Then he drove to the modest apartment he was renting downtown, the kind of place he used to make fun of, and wondered how he'd gotten here, how he'd gone from thinking he owned the world to being locked out of a building that should have been his home. But it was never his home. It was always hers. Imani never spoke to Terence again. Never took his calls or responded to his emails. When he tried to reach out through lawyers about the divorce, her legal team handled it with brutal efficiency. She gave him nothing, not a settlement, not an apology, nothing. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences and included a complete accounting of what he'd actually contributed to their marriage versus what he'd taken. The numbers weren't pretty, but Imani wasn't focused on destruction. She was focused on building. The company had taken a hit in the immediate aftermath of the gala, stock price dipping as investors worried about stability. But Imani addressed it head on. She did her first public interview in 10 years, sat down with a major business publication and told her story, not with bitterness, not with revenge, just with facts. She'd built Sterling Global. She'd let her husband take credit to support his ego. She'd tolerated disrespect to keep the peace. And when it became clear that peace was never the goal, she'd taken back what was hers. The interview went viral. Women across every industry shared it, saw themselves in her story. The quiet competence that got overlooked. The credit given to men for work women did. The way silence was mistaken for weakness. Imani became a symbol of something bigger than corporate drama. She became a reminder that patience isn't the same as powerlessness. Sterling Global's stock recovered within 2 months and then shot higher than it had ever been. Imani promoted from within, gave opportunities to people who'd been loyal and hardworking, who'd never thought to stab someone in the back to get ahead. She created a mentorship program for young women in STEM, particularly young Black women who faced the same doubts and discrimination she'd navigated. She spoke at conferences, not about her personal drama, but about innovation, leadership, and the power of building something real. 6 months after the gala, Imani drove back to North Carolina, back to the small town where she'd grown up, back to the cemetery where her mother was buried under a simple headstone with her name and the dates that bookended a life of quiet strength. Imani knelt in the grass, placed her worn leather journal on the ground in front of the headstone, and spoke like her mother could hear her. "I built them all, Mama. Every dream we wrote down in this journal, the company, the success, the life I wanted. And I did it the way you taught me. quiet, strong, unbreakable. She touched the headstone, traced her mother's name with her finger. I hope you're proud. I hope you're watching. I hope you know that everything you taught me mattered. She stayed there for an hour, just sitting in the grass, remembering Sunday dinners and homework help and the way her mother used to hum while she graded papers, remembering the woman who'd believed in her when she was just a girl with big dreams and no idea how to achieve them. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter, like she'd closed a circle, like she'd proven something not to the world, but to herself. On her way out of the cemetery, a young woman approached her. She couldn't have been more than 25, wearing business casual and carrying a leather portfolio. She looked nervous but determined. Miss Sterling, I'm sorry to bother you. I saw you speaking at the tech conference last month. I'm a developer just starting out, and I wanted to thank you for showing us that we don't have to be loud to be powerful, that we can build things and claim them and not apologize for taking up space. Imani smiled, a real smile, the kind she hadn't allowed herself in years. You were always powerful. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. The young woman nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. Imani watched her go, thinking about how many women had probably felt invisible in rooms full of men who took credit for their ideas. How many had stayed quiet because they thought that was the only option. How many were just now learning that silence could be a choice instead of a surrender. Imani returned to her work, but with boundaries now. She hired a president to handle daily operations, someone brilliant and trustworthy who shared her vision. She stepped back from the 16-hour days and the constant grind. She bought a small house on the coast of North Carolina, nothing flashy, just a place with a porch and a view of the water. She filled it with books and art and space to breathe. She started a scholarship fund in her mother's name, full rides to college for young black women pursuing STEM degrees. The applications poured in by the hundreds. She went back to that simple life she'd had before Terrence, before the mansion and the galas and the pressure to be someone she wasn't. She woke up early, walked on the beach, drank coffee on her porch while she watched the sunrise. She wrote in a new journal, this one not about dreams, but about gratitude, about lessons learned and battles won and peace found on the other side of pain. People asked her in interviews if she'd ever trust someone again, if she'd ever open herself up to love after what Terrence had done. Imani's answer was always the same. I never stopped trusting people. I just started trusting myself more. She didn't need a man to validate her success, didn't need anyone's permission to take up space. She'd learned the hardest way possible, that you can't make someone see your value if they're determined to overlook it. And she'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from people who don't deserve you. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes the quietest people are the most powerful. They don't need to announce their worth. They simply are. And when you underestimate someone because they don't make noise, because they don't demand attention, because they move through the world with grace instead of force, you've already lost. The truth always comes to light. Always. It might take a day or a year or a decade, but it comes. And karma, she never forgets. She watches, she waits, and when the time is right, she delivers exactly what people earned. Imani Sterling built an empire. She let people take credit. She stayed quiet while others got loud. She endured humiliation with dignity, and when the moment came, when patience had finally run its course, she took back everything that was hers and left her betrayers with nothing but the memory of their own cruelty. She didn't raise her voice, didn't throw fits, didn't burn bridges. She simply revealed the truth, and the truth was enough. I'll see you in the next one.